So if you're just putting an $8 appetizer on your menu, it's not going to do anything. But if you're getting the team behind it and you're incentivizing them to do it, you're running a sales contest, you're encouraging them, you're posting the data, you're showing them the impact of this, they're getting behind the win. Everybody wants to be successful. It's a team effort. You'll see them really embrace that pretty quickly.
So something that we do here at KitchenSync every week is something called KitchenSync University, where we have a member of our team in different roles. Could be entry level, could be here for a while. Chris has been here for a while. Help with a different topic, right? So we'll do a presentation on a different topic. This week's was how to increase check average at a restaurant. So super important thing, super important part of building revenue. Obviously with increased revenue comes increased bottom line. So Chris gave a presentation this morning to our whole team about different strategies for building check average. And I wanted to get him here to chat a little bit about that presentation, chat a little bit about some of the strategies that he recommends to his clients for going ahead and building check average. And you mentioned a couple of different upsells, right? That seemed pretty easy and logical. So one was appetizers. Can you run me through some of the math on what potentially pushing an appetizer to a handful of tables a day might do to your bottom line?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, let's look at the basics first of all of the simple math and looking at the big picture of why check average is important, right? So if you've got a busy restaurant and you can increase 100 guests, if you can encourage 100 guests to spend an additional $1 a day, that's it. 100 guests over a year, that's over $36,000 a year, right? So let's kind of break it down into specific different categories, because quick service restaurants and fine dining restaurants are going to have different strategies, but the math works out to be the same thing. So an analogy in a scenario that I was working with a client was we started talking about their menu, and they were coming up with some, what can they do? So we talked about, hey, let's create a value item that is an easy upsell. So they created an appetizer. They priced it at $8, really reasonable, right? Pretty cheap, yeah. On a $25, per entree kind of a head, an $8 appetizer is a good value. So it's a good entry point for their guests. We figured, all right, what's our goal here? We want to sell it to 10 tables a day. Right? Pretty reasonable, right? 10. So we've got $80 a day coming in just from one $8 appetizer. So when we started to look at it, say, hey, that's $2,400 a month in additional revenue just from this one item. Over time, I mean, when you're looking at a year, that's almost $29,000 a year from one entry-level appetizer that they're adding to their menu. So that becomes real dollars.
But it's not enough to put it on the menu, right? Like you got to train servers on this. Like what are the tips that you got to give your team to make sure you're pushing this thing, right? Just throwing it on there is not enough.
No. It takes a whole culture of training and encouragement, right? So, I mean, they've got to know everything there is to know. Why are you doing it? What's the reason behind it? The more you share this with your teams, the more they're aware and they're behind the effort to get this in front of the guests. You taste them on it. You show them why they're doing it. You show them the math behind it. And for the servers, what's the impact to them is their increased tip. So they can once our restaurants, and that's what we do at KitchenSync, is we really talk to them in terms of data. So when they're starting to look at, hey, $29,000 a year, what does that mean in terms of additional revenue for the staff? The servers can make, if they're making 20% of that, then all of a sudden you're talking about pretty good increases in their tip takeout. So that you start to incentivize them and you start to look at, you communicate, you celebrate, you get behind it, you work with the team so they understand what you're trying to do. So it's not hidden somewhere on the menu and it's buried so nobody sees it.
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about too, that I've heard you talk about with clients, right, is incentive programs, right? So beyond the tips, like that's all great, but really get people to focus. What about like competitions and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So people 100%. Argue, hey, we're not making enough money to incentivize our staff. It's like, well, when they perform, that's where the money comes from. So you give them a piece of the upside, and everybody wins, right? So
yeah, and just in the most basic level, I mean, we have restaurants that are really smart about this and look at an average tip rate. And so and especially in a quick service operation where it's not a direct tip situation, you can look at the income that is generated for the staff by this, and that's all information. The key is sharing that information, sharing it with the people that are actually out there on the trenches making the difference, right? And so if you're just putting an $8 appetizer on your menu, it's not going to do anything. But if you're getting the team behind it and you're incentivizing them to do it, you're running a sales contest, you're encouraging them, you're posting the data, you're showing them the impact of this, they're getting behind the win. Everybody wants to be successful. It's a team effort. You'll see them really embrace that pretty quickly.
So going back a sec, we were talking about why building check average is so important, because so many of our restaurant clients are talking to us about, marketing. How do I get more butts in seats? Like, how do I get more people in here? And, from my perspective, they're not realizing like there's two ways to build revenue here and to build your bottom line with that. And, it's not just butts in seats. It's getting more out of every butt that's in the seats, right? Critical kind of component, and, something that a lot of restaurants really overlook. But what are some situations where like a restaurant really should be leaning into check average building as opposed to building, their head count and guest count as much?
Well, okay, so the challenge is, how do you get more butts and seats, right? That's really, in many cases, it's somewhat out of the control of the restaurant. So I think the key to that is looking at your situation and maximizing where you're at, right? Live within your backyard. So if you're let's say, for example, your business is weekend business and you're super busy on the weekends, you can't add any more guests in the weekends. Your reservations are maxed. You've coordinated the tables. You're doing 2.5 turns. You're busy, but on the weekdays you're slow. So you've got to think through, okay, that's my situation. Until I can build my business up, the reality is all of my business is coming in on Friday and Saturday. I've got to maximize that revenue coming in on Friday and Saturday. So I better capture every guest that I can, every opportunity with those guests that I can. Same thing for seasonal restaurants. We see this a lot, right? In the summertime, business can go up 40%, and then in some cases it just in the wintertime comes and it's dead. They have to make all their money in the season.
Right.
So they better be really smart about capturing as much as they can, from all the guests coming in, and making smart menu decisions and smart staffing decisions to help the servers maximize what the guests are willing to spend.
So we talked a little bit about server incentives, right? What are some other things that you can do to make sure that these items that you put on your menu are actually landing on the table and building check average?
Yeah, so there's a few things. There can be some appeal to those. Let's say you're creating a beverage and it's something that you just want to kind of goose your check average. Make it a limited time offering, right? Create some FOMO behind it. That in itself is a good server incentive for somebody that's hey, this is only here for, it's truffle season right now, so we're going to do an add-on for truffles, but it's only happening for this 2 weeks. Right. That will drive that. That's a strategy to drive that. How it's laid out on the menu. Are you using the menu in a smart way? So are you highlighting those items? Are they buried somewhere in the bottom? Are you putting a box around it? Are you putting it at the top right where the eyes tend to go when people are looking at menus, right? Either the top left or the top right is the first thing that people look at. So what the layout's important. Make it easier on your staff to sell this item, and they'll sell it.
You mentioned something earlier about bundling. Can you explain what you're talking about?
Sure. So value is really important nowadays, right? People are talking about wanting to get more value, and value is really an individual perception. So if I'm going into a restaurant, I understand what I'm willing to spend and I want to, and the experience that I want to do or get. So if they're struggling with, let's say, beverage sales, I was just talking to a client about this yesterday, as a matter of fact, where for some reason they were just banging their heads on the door going, how do we get more beer and wine sales from our guests? They're doing great on food, but they just can't seem to get this in this particular environment. So we started talking about, well, how do you put together a menu that creates value perception for a guest? It seems to be a good value, but in essence, what you're doing is you're getting extra money from the guest by putting items together. So let's say you're a pizza concept. Well, what if you were to put together a pizza and a beer bundle, or an appetizer and an entree? Put it together, make it seem like, hey, this is great. It really takes the pressure off a guest to make decisions, right? So it makes their experience better. gives them good value, makes it easier on the staff to do it, and basically you're getting additional revenue from that one order, where the guests feel like instead of just getting they're still in their mind they're buying an entree. In actuality, they're buying an entree and maybe a beverage and maybe something additional to go with that. Make it easy on the guests, and they'll be willing to spend.
Awesome. Yeah, just going through your presentation here. So you talked a little bit about margin impact. Can you dig in a little bit on that?
Yeah, 100%. This is really the crux of why check average is so important, right? So every year, what happens? Labor cost goes up. Minimum wage goes up. In many markets, energy costs are going up. We all know the cost of food is going up. So everything's going up and up and up. What's not going up is people's spend. So those margins get eroded. So the amount that it's costing you to make the same dish this year is more expensive than last year, almost across the board.
Right.
So getting that same amount of money from that dish, and you can't raise your prices to a point where you're going to turn off guests and they're going to stop coming with the same frequency. So it's a real tightrope in terms of pricing, and that's the other strategy that restaurants jump into is I've got to raise prices.
Right.
That's a dangerous slippery slope, because you're going to price yourself out of additional guest visits, which is then you've got the problem of you've got the butts and seats issue.
Right.
So so looking at that, how do you get more revenue from those guests with the same labor that you've got without having to add more labor or add more facilities expenses or more marketing expenses? So a simple $4, $8 add to a check doesn't cost you a penny more in labor, doesn't cost you anything else to get those, and it helps mitigate those, which in many cases labor has almost become a fixed cost for restaurants, because the cost of labor is so high that they can only, they have to staff at a certain level to execute.
Yeah.
So they really need to be thinking about how they can help those reduced margins that they're facing with all those increasing costs. And that's the way they have to do it, because if they're not going to get more people in the door, they have to maximize what's there.
Nice. So look, what I'm hearing is too many restaurants are just focused on getting butts and seats, not thinking about building revenue and building their bottom line from increasing check average. Increasing check average is not just about increasing the price of your existing menus. It's
right.
about better training, getting more stuff on the table, providing value, bundling items, upselling. There's a lot of different tactics to build check average, and
I want to really tag off a point that you just made, Alex, and that's and it goes back to just what I was saying about the first reaction is increasing menu prices. So check average, focusing on check average is really, that's what you're doing, is you're able to increase your menu prices without increasing your menu prices. If you know what I mean? So you can getting more money out of the guests without increasing your prices and potentially scaring them away from coming to your restaurant. That's a critical thing nowadays. It's absolutely essential, and it's smart business. You can do it. So you still have that value perception that your guests are used to when they're coming in, but realizing that they feel good about the fact that, instead of spending $50, I spent $60, and I feel good about it because the value was there and I had a great experience, and I don't feel like they were just hitting me with more expensive menu items.
Totally. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been super helpful. It was a great presentation to the team. I'm glad that our staff can walk away and take some of this back to their clients. So appreciate you doing that, putting this together.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Alex.